ready and freshened up and dolled up for a souvenir group photo. And by the way, guys, we are streaming live on Facebook. So for those of you who have friends who would like to also watch via Facebook, please invite them. We're live on Facebook at the moment. And I'd like to also take this opportunity as early as now to give thanks to our generous sponsors who never tired of helping us and supporting us in this endeavor and these webinar series that have been happening in the past few days, this long month activity. Special thank you to Connects, Angeline, Unitech, Davis Paints, Tongson Law Offices, VK5 Solutions, PTE Limited Singapore. Maraming salamat. So, President Mark, are we ready for the group photo?
Yes, sir. Done already. Thank you.
All right. All right. So let's continue. And this evening, ladies and gentlemen, we have the opportunity to get to know a great man in the field of architecture and urban planning. I myself is very much excited to know his story as an expat, the challenges, the struggles that came along, and how he's able to overcome them. Well, this guy needs no introduction, especially if you're an architect. For sure, some of you might have seen some of his projects and read his literature somewhere. And he's been everywhere, like literally everywhere, from the Manila Times, People Asia magazine, Forbes Asia magazine, Business Mirror, and a lot more. Nonetheless, let me share with you a little background of him. Our speaker has 48 years of experience in architecture and 46 years in planning. He was educated in Christ the King Seminary, University of Santo Tomas, and University of the Philippines, and Harvard University. He has lectured in more than 20 countries, and he has traveled to and observed more than 1,000 cities and 79 countries and territories. He founded, leads, and manages Palafox Associates and Palafox Architecture Group Incorporated, which have already completed more than 1,600 projects in 40 countries. Among his many awards would be, well, Forbes Asia magazine cited him as one of their 48 heroes of philanthropy in Asia. In 2009, he was awarded as People of the Year by People Asia. In 2017, he was awarded by the JCI Senate as one of the three top outstanding Filipinos. He was also recognized by the Professional Regulatory Commission as the 2019 Most Outstanding Professional of the Year in the field of environmental planning. He led Palafox Associates to be the first Filipino architectural firm cited in the world's top 500 architectural firms of the World Architecture magazine. In 2006, Palafox held the distinction of being the only Southeast Asian firm in the top 100. And aside from his duties in his architectural firm, he also serves as a member of the board of directors in Asian Terminals Incorporated from 2009 to present. Chaired professional and civic organizations such as Philippine Institute of Environmental Planners, Management Association of the Philippines, and Rotary Club of Manila. Also, a fellow of United Architects of the Philippines, from being a senior architect and planner of the government of Dubai at the age of 27 to a well-renowned and celebrated architect of our homeland. Ladies and gentlemen, let's say hi and hello to architect Felino June Palafox Jr.
Yeah. Thank you for inviting me. Glad to be here. I'm Jude Palafox. Sorry I could not connect right away. I was in an international call. Can you hear me?
We can hear you, architect.
All right. Thank you. Thank you for the generous introduction. I caught up towards the end already. So, how do we prepare some slides, but we can have a continuing conversation this week if you wish, and to show you what we're doing. So, before Dubai, I was team leader for the Metro Manila Transportation Land Development Planning Project uh, um, in 1974 to early 1977. Because we had consultants from the UK, from the US. Yeah. So, and that's where Sultan Khalifa of Dubai got to know about me because leaders of Dubai to read Metro Plan Manila, which was the, I'm told, one of the best metro plans.
All right, I think we're having a technical difficulty, so please bear with us, guys, as we are going to fix the audio of our speaker.
Yeah.
One moment. Okay.
Okay, again,
Yes, you're coming clear now, architect.
it's raining in Makati. It's probably why. But anyway, so from that Metro Plan Manila, I had to work for Philippine government for 2 years as a payback for my scholarship grant at UP for my master's degree in environmental planning, urban regional planning. So I was a scholar in the United Nations Development Program, uh, University of the Philippines Scholar, and Department of Public Works Transportation and Communication Scholar. So I had 3 scholarships at UP, so I had to pay back for at least 2 years, work for government. Of course, before that, I took up architecture at UST, University of Santo Tomas. And at age 26, I was named hard to help plan the futures of Dubai. And I was the youngest in the international multidisciplinary team of architects, planners, engineers from 20 countries. I was the only Southeast Asian. The connection is bad. Hello?
Yes, architect, you're kind of breaking in and out there.
Yeah, yeah. Sorry about that.
Yeah,
So,
very much okay.
yeah. So, after Dubai, we've done projects in 40 countries, and I've been privileged to have guest lectured also in 20 countries, including Harvard and MIT, and so on. And ever since, we've done projects, as I said, in 40 countries, about 44 billion square meters of land. I think that's about more than 60 times Singapore or Metro Manila. And architecture, about 17 million square meters of building floor area. And I've been very fortunate. Maybe I've been at the right place at the right time. Because all my previous employment, I was invited. And in 1989, after working with Ayala Corporation, Ayala Land, and consultant to Henry C., I put up Palafox Associates July 1st, 1989. And I was warned that it was the worst time to start a company because of the coup attempts against President Kony and the fall of the Berlin Wall, the Tiananmen Square massacre, August.
Architect, go ahead.
Yeah. Can you hear me? Am I okay? Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
All right. So 1989. I was told that was the worst time to start start a new company. As I said, there were military coup attempts against President Cory, the fall of the Berlin Wall, the Tiananmen Square massacre in China, and fall of communism and so on. And what I intended to do that time was go to more than 99% of the market is outside the Philippines. So again, we did some work again in Dubai, Indonesia, Saipan. But at the same time, Henry C. of SM gave us more than 5 SM projects, and then JY campus of Unilab, Manila Southwoods, and several other properties. And I was able to work with, choose who would be working with foreign consultants. And I just adlib, I don't, and also I think one thing that helped me is continuing education. I was invited to guest lecture in Massachusetts Institute of Technology and Harvard Graduate School of Design. And it was in Harvard that I enrolled. I was a lecturer before I became a student. And at Harvard, I am very fortunate enough to have as my two of our speakers are great architects this time. Art Gensler, the founder of Gensler, and Con Peterson Fox, Eugene Cohn of KPF were my professors and also visiting professors. And Gerald Hines, one of the biggest property developers in the world, like Houston Galleria, Dallas Galleria, Copy Paste Boston, a lot of projects in London and so on. So I've been able to work with so many multinational, international contacts and so on. Then back again to the Philippines, how did I become an architect? When I was in my childhood, we loved to go to the beach, and my brothers and friends would do sandcastles. I was doing townships, buildings, mountains, rivers, and so on. And one thing I like very much also was regularly we go to church because our home was across the church with a big bell tower. So my first vocation was priesthood. So I entered the seminary at age 13, Christ Taking Seminary in Quezon City with SVDs, the one who were missionaries. And most of our mentors are Germans, Americans, and other Europeans. And again, I think there I was taught leadership. It was like at age 13, I was class senior, head of the our class of freshmen, then a time manager, then a librarian, then president and editor of uh, the student council of the seminary. And UST, the same thing. I was editor-in-chief of the Vision magazine. So selecting which student designs would be featured in the Vision magazine. So I think of this, I was able to live with international company in the seminary with these foreigners, and again at UST, and then at UP, most of our professors again were foreigners. Then working in Metroplan, consultants are all over the world. Then in Dubai, the same thing. And I may have mentioned I was the youngest and the only Southeast Asian among 20 senior expatriates. I was already included as senior. I was only 27 years old. And in Dubai, I think was the breakthrough because in Dubai, we started from a desert to what it is today. And I was involved in so many things. Architectural design elevation. I chaired that committee. But every building that would go up in Dubai would be there's an architectural control, and with the urban context, how it contributes to the surroundings, the community, and the ruler of Dubai instructed us make Dubai join the first world in 15 years. Design Dubai as if there's no oil. Create a garden city out of the desert. Make Dubai as a pace setter city in the Middle East and North Africa. One thing I like very much was for every year of service, 1 month around the world with your family, with our family. And at that time, because of the instruction of the ruler, make Dubai first world from the third or fourth world, a desert community. in 15 years. So we look around. Most of my colleagues look at London, Paris, New York. I've been there also, but I thought those London, Paris, New York, it took them centuries to be where they are. So I look for cities elsewhere in the world that are that became first world in less than 15 years. So San Francisco, go west, young man. So San Francisco started with gold, then became a construction boom camp, and then shopping center, regional center, aerospace center, banking center, and now it's information technology center. So San Francisco did not stop with gold in construction, because Dubai, in a few years' time, that time it will run out of oil. So Dubai had to diversify and become first world in 15 years. So San Francisco became first world in less than 15 years. So another benchmark would be Hong Kong. How did Hong Kong get started? Opium. So may pag-asa pa Pilipinas. So Hong Kong started with opium, then it became a trading center, regional center, then the communist contingent from China, the Chinese uh, um, escaping from the communism in China, they went to Hong Kong, brought with them garment making and manufacturing. So Hong Kong, from opium to manufacturing, garment making, trading center, tourism center, banking center, financial center. And then I went to Singapore and observed and talked to much older people, anecdotal research and research. Singapore is so fortunate because of Lee Kuan Yew. Singapore was kicked out from the Federation of Malaysia. I think you know that. And Singapore was very fortunate. They had a Lee Kuan Yew, an honor graduate from Cambridge in the UK. And Singapore, I think the strategy of Lee Kuan Yew was learn from Hong Kong with better landscaping, and also one priority of Lee Kuan Yew was make Singapore a hub, a gateway. So in 1977, uh, every 30 minutes, there was a major ship at the port of Singapore every 30 minutes. But Singapore was turning over a housing Yeah, can you hear me now?
Yes, you're in now, sir.
Yeah. Where did I start? Singapore with Lee Kuan Yew?
Yes, architect.
Yeah. So with Lee Kuan Yew, make Singapore as a hub, a center for Southeast Asia, and maybe even the rest of the world. So 1977, Singapore was every 30 minutes, there was a major ship calling at port, Singapore port, every 30 minutes. And every 20 minutes, Singapore government was turning over every 20 minutes, one dwelling unit every 20 minutes. So you could see landscaping, housing, international port, international seaport, and no corruption and no drugs. And Manila should have been the first financial center, but Singapore overtook Manila for that. And then from Singapore, I sought cities that became first world in less than 15 years. So Zurich and Geneva. How did Zurich and Geneva get started? From refugees during the two world wars. Uh, they brought with them chocolate making and watchmaking. So that's how they get started in Zurich and Geneva. So became banking center, tourism center, financial center, and so on. And uh, then I went back to the conversation table in Dubai because so Dubai borrowed money to Lloyd's of London to fast track the infrastructure of Dubai. And it really overtook many of the Arabian Gulf countries because the rulers of Dubai have strong political will, visionary leadership, and they really good appreciation of good urban planning, architecture, engineering, and very good governance. I think the same success formula of Singapore. And in Dubai, after 4 years, my daughter Karima was the first Filipino born there, and we were the first Filipino families there. And I got involved in so many projects: urban planning, master planning, architecture, public transportation planning, industrial estate planning, and Jebel Ali, that's the largest man-made harbor in the world and one of the busiest seaports now in the world. And what I've been seeing is that these good leadership traits of rulers. Dubai, like Singapore, doesn't have as much natural resources, doesn't even have as much oil as Saudi Arabia, Kuwait, Abu Dhabi, and so on. But visionary leadership is strong political will. I think that really the rapid development of Dubai and Singapore because of those leadership, not so much of natural resources. And then in Dubai, Henry C. of SM visited me in my home because he was surprised with the rapid urbanization and development of Dubai. And Filipino expatriates at the hotels in Dubai, they told Henry C. that this a young Filipino architect helping the plans of Dubai. So Henry C. came to our house in Dubai, and he said the Philippines need you more than Dubai. So you decide to come home, there's a job and projects waiting for you. So 1981, after 4 years, I decided to come home, and our Dubai employers were surprised because they gave us a indefinite visa. They gave us a villa, 1 ton excess baggage allowance, uh, free car, free gasoline, and so on. And we were treated so well in Dubai. I think even much more than my European and American colleagues because I was name hired. I did not apply for the job. And then in Dubai, I think the first time they saw a Filipino expat that time, I was wearing our Barong Tagalog in summer. Then in winter, they have cold weather also. I wore suit and necktie. And I got invited to all the big events in Dubai, national days of the US, European cities, Japan. Apologies for that. Are we back? Can you hear me?
Yes, dear back architect.
So, so Dubai and then back to the Philippines. The late Enrique Sobel and Henry C. both invited me to join their companies. So for a while, I was with Henry C. as a consultant, in-house consultant. Then later on, Enrique Sobel of Ayala invited me to practically start a new group in Ayala, in the technical planning group of Ayala, because at that time they redundated, I think, about 55 architects and planners. So I practically started in Ayala Labang, Ayala Heights, Cebu Business Park, uh, among many other redevelopment of Makati Commercial Center, Alabang Town Center, Magallanes Town Center, and so on. Then after Ayala, sa 6.5 years at Ayala, I put up Palafox Associates. And one of my first clients again is Henry C. And I think we almost all the Taipans and Tycoons have been our clients. I started with 3 people, and then I always wanted to be, my goal was Palafox Associates would be #1 in the Philippines in 25 years. And in 9 years, World Architecture Magazine of London cited Palafox Associates as one of the only Filipino firm, the first in the top 500 architects in the world, of which we were number 220. So that was 1998, 1999. Then again, my goal was to have Palafox Associates become number one in Southeast Asia in another 25 years. By 2006, we were cited as the only Southeast Asian firm, 2006, number 89 in the world, and number 8 in resorts and hotels. So, so that was 2006. So somehow we're able to achieve my goal sooner than I thought. But after that, I did not aspire anymore to be the largest and so on. I'd rather be more significant or most admired rather than most successful firm. And many of the things we're doing I am personally doing at Palafox, it's not just to excel in architecture, because in our country, there are many challenges in our country. Like without corruption, criminality, and if we address effectively more the corruption, criminality, and climate change, the Philippines should be in the top 20 economies of the world. And when I became president, the first architect president, I think the only one of management association in the Philippines, more than 1,000 CEOs in the Philippines. In my inaugural address, I told them that you address criminality, climate change, corruption, and climate change, we would make it to the top 20 countries in the world. And I told them why we can have that. So develop a culture of integrity, addressing those three issues. Because how can we do that? We're number one in the world in marine biodiversity, number one. We're number one in the world in sailors, seamen. We're number one in the world in call centers. I'd like to believe we're number one in doctors and nurses. We're number two in the world in, in, in geothermal energy. Number two in the world in BPOs. I think we're about number three or number five with the longest coastline in the world. Some countries go to war because they don't have a coastline, like Iraq invading Kuwait and the two world wars. Some countries in Europe wanted to have the waterfront of the Atlantic. In Dubai, 70 kilometers of natural waterfront were all sold out as prime real estate. So Sheikh Mohammed, the current ruler now, decided to make the artificial palm islands in the world to increase the waterfront of Dubai. And yet the Philippines is the third or fifth longest coastline in the world. Unfortunately, we treat our waterfront as back of the house. Unlike progressive cities in countries like Singapore, waterfront is natural, it's prime real estate, front door of development. Singapore was only 65,000 hectares, the size of Guimaras Island across Iloilo. Now Singapore is 71,000 hectares due to reclamation. And that's a best practice that the rest of the world should be able to get inspired with. So we are number four in the world in shipbuilding, number four in the world in gold reserves.
All right, guys. Well, we are waiting for architect Palafox. For those of you who have questions or you want to consult something to architect, please, write down or take note of them. So once he comes back or after the talk, we can have the Q&A or at least an open forum. Thank you.
Can you hear me again?
Yes,
Yeah,
yes, sir. You're back.
so where was I? Uh, so we're number five in the world in all other mineral resources. And number 12, the human resources. Filipino expatriates are the preferred employees of employers around the world. Kings, queens, sheikhs, developers, hospitals, uh, hotels, what have you. And so there's so many things that we can do to yeah, the connection is not, it's not good. So can you hear me now?
Yes,
Yes,
architect.
architect. Yeah, we prepared some 3D animation, but it may not, what we're doing in the Philippines now, and maybe how Dubai get started. Let's try it. Otherwise, we just continue the conversation. But one of my advocacies is since the late 70s to early 80s, we Filipinos abroad were called expatriates, expats. I don't know who in the Philippines started branding the Filipino expats OFW, just like prisoners of war. We already had a good brand, and government, the media, they changed the good brand into OFW. So one of my advocacies now, Filipinos abroad are considered to be the modern day heroes, and yet the branding from Filipino expats were downgraded to OFWs. That's what I've been trying to, one of my advocacies right now. And then also, with the 10% of Filipinos abroad, especially our architects, Singapore, Dubai, elsewhere in the world, you could bring home the best practices in the world and help our country. And one of the things we are doing, aside from the architecture for business, commerce, and civic architecture, I have what I call architectural activism. So I'm one of those fighting corruption. I have about 111 million pesos in libel cases for telling the truth. But somehow, maybe it even helped our awareness. There's such a thing as architectural activism. We also practice philanthropic architecture, of which I got cited by uh, Forbes Asia magazine as one of the 48 heroes of philanthropy in Asia, together with my clients, Taipan clients, Henry C. and Gokong Wei. And I practice architecture for the poor, democratic architecture, uh, and architecture for humanity, architecture of faith, and walking the talk. There was a six-star hotel proposed in Subic. So we had the contract for 1 million US dollars. And then our clients, foreign investors, instructed me to destroy 366 70-year-old trees. And it really bothered my conscience because a 50-year-old tree, to me, the replacement value is about 10 million pesos for 50 years. So 12-year-old trees, 366 70-year-old trees. So that's more than the $1 million architect's fee that we signed. So I returned the contract and I got harassed, libel cases, 50 million libel cases, and so on. Only when CNN, BBC, Al Jazeera came to the Philippines and reported on my the crazy architect who would give up $1 million to save the trees. They say first time in the world. And after that harassment, all of that, several foreign investor clients to the Philippines, they 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 hired me, they hired us to do their projects. The investment, $1 billion investment from the Emirs of Kuwait. Again, they name hired us to do a 177-hectare global gateway across Clark Airport. Then the Emirs of Qatar, they also hired us. Then the US government, we're the only non-American shortlisted to do the American battle monuments in 6 countries. Then the Sultan of Brunei, and even a Muslim, he name hired us to design with the architects of the largest mosque in our country, in Cotabato City. So I told myself, uh, fighting for your principles, you close one door of opportunity, you open more windows of opportunity by sticking to your principles. So, walking the talk, Just stick to your principles. Of course, it's very challenging, and sometimes it's dangerous to your health. You get death threats and so on. But somehow, I think if I believe that only 1% of Filipinos are corrupt, but 99% of Filipinos don't care anymore. It's very unfortunate. Scared to report corruption and so on. But especially for Filipino expatriates, you've been in the first world. And if you only have good governance, the nation can have good governance. I strongly believe that we can be number 16 to number 19 top economy in the world. And with that, and even the Philippines has so many advantages. The Philippines, I don't know if I said it earlier, the Philippines is 400 times the size of Singapore, 350 times the size of Hong Kong, 8 times the size of Taiwan, 3 times the size of South Korea. And if you rotate the map of the world, the Philippines is right in the center. And all superpower countries, they will be interested in our beautiful islands. Just like for more than 300 years, we were the Asia-Pacific hub of Spanish Europe. For more than 50 years, we were the Asia-Pacific hub of the Americans. 2 years, the British, 4 years, the Japanese, and the Dutch failed to colonize us. So the Philippines, with its location, should naturally be the gateway in the Asia Pacific instead of Hong Kong or Singapore. But Singapore has better governance. So hopefully, I strongly believe that we can bring our country into the first world in 15 to 20 years, by 2035, 2040. But Filipinos abroad, Filipino expats, I think you can write to our congressmen or senators, write to the newspapers. At least if how many, I think about 60 architects in Singapore may have passed by our office. And I think because if only one person report corruption, you can be harassed, libel cases. But if 100 courageous Filipinos report corruption, you cannot, it's very expensive to file a libel case. And then you from abroad, you cannot be harassed because you are abroad. Yes, write to the newspapers, write to, there's a volunteer against crime and corruption. Write to UAP also. And maybe while you're in Singapore, take down lessons to be learned in Singapore and how you can help our country. Because in the Philippines, we have so many stupid, no, not stupid, obsolete laws that make our country less globally competitive. Like in Singapore, below 30 meters is public domain. So you can do subways in Singapore, even an underground city. In the Philippines, you own property here, I think you can claim up to the center of the earth, up to the skies. In Singapore, 30 meters below, it's public domain. So no problem of right of way. The congestion charging in Singapore, Metropolitan Manila, of which I was a team leader for the World Bank, we proposed it in 1976. Congestion charging. You pay when you enter congested areas. Dubai, they already implemented it, and so on. The light rail transit, we proposed it in 1976. We should have completed 8 lines of LRT by 1992. What happened? Circumferential Road number 6 was proposed by the American Corps of Engineers in 1945. It's only now being built. And before I was born, it was already proposed. So in the Philippines, I don't know if we can have a short presentation, but if not, I've been proposing interconnecting our islands, bridges, tunnels, railways, and so on. And now they're doing it now. The feasibility study is connecting Bataan and Cavite, circumferential road number 10, to interconnect Calabarzon and Central Luzon. So you bypass Metro Manila's congestion. I had proposed also the whole Philippines and Maglev of Germany, the makers of the fastest train in the world. They came to see me in my office about 15 years ago. Lawag to Davao, Lawag Ilocos Norte to Davao in Mindanao would only take 2 hours if we have the Maglev train. So a lot of things can be done. And again, I'm saying this, Filipino expats, you can help our country like the best practices in Singapore. You write them down. You write. Maybe get my email address and you write to me and I will quote you. I will acknowledge you. This is what they're doing in Singapore. how is Singapore managed so well. And Singapore is 45% open space. In Metro Manila, even Makati, they're selling open spaces. Singapore, you wouldn't do that. And even people now with this pandemic, even some planners are erroneously blaming density. And I told them, density is not the problem. Overcrowding is the problem. So in Singapore, with your 45% open spaces, you have the lungs of the city. Yeah, so it's really a healthy city and so on. So with that, I think we can have a conversation. We don't have to show anymore the slides and the 3D animation. We're all architects. We can all visualize. And one of my professors in Harvard used to tell us that this century will be a re-century, reimagine, redesign, re-architecture, re-engineer, redevelop. And hopefully we'll have urban renaissance. And I think Singapore's ahead also in green architecture, green urbanism, and we have 12 green sustainable principles in helping our country. And every project that we do it for God, country, and planet Earth, and guided by the bottom line approach to develop people first, then planet Earth. Then we can talk about prosperity and profit, culture, history, and heritage, and interfaith spirituality. I think I've spoken enough, and let's have a dialogue, a conversation. Thank you for the opportunity to share. Thank you.
All right. Well, thank you, Architect June, for sharing your journey with us. It's very interesting. And to all the participants, again, if you have questions or something in mind, just please let us know by sending it or typing it in our chat box. And there is one here. It says from Architect Rogelio Santos. It says, "Good evening, Architect Palafox. For the sake of clarification, is there a sort of discrimination when a Filipino expatriate is famously branded as OFW by our government authorities?" Again, question is coming from Architect Rogelio Santos Jr. of UAP Baraswain chapter.
Yeah, I think it's felt. Uh, when I came back as an expat, but many of the architects, engineers, OFWs, branded as OFWs, I think there's some stigma there because many of the architects, engineers who have been in the Middle East, Saudi Arabia, and so on, they also told me that 30, 40 years ago, they were called expats. But when they were branded as OFW, even their compensation package went down. Like when I was in Dubai, I had the same package as the Europeans and Americans, and I even felt that I was treated much better. And even coming home to the Philippines, I like to remove that, take out the OFW uh, uh, downgrading of the brand. So I've been telling even I've written 3 books, more than 700 published articles about architecture, environment, urban planning. But one of the articles I've been writing about is Filipino expatriates. Many expats like the Chinese Americans, Chinese Europeans, Indian Americans, when they go home, it's a brain gain. When we go out of the country, it's a brain drain. Coming back, it should be a brain gain. Unfortunately, that's not being harnessed very well. It's not just architects, engineers, even doctors. They're lumped together with even the domestic helpers, DH. Some of them are college graduates, and some of them are butlers, mayordoma, in charge of the big households of sheikhs. And they should not be called DH or FW. And I hope I'll be able to help raise better branding for Filipino expatriates.
All right, well, that makes sense. And yeah, I agree that branding really tells a lot when it comes to not just architects, but all the Filipinos who work outside the country. So yeah, that's very interesting. That's a new learning for me. I like Architect June what you've said when brain gain and brain drain. So that's something that that's really mind steering, and that's something that we can contemplate about. And another question, Architect June, from UAP Manila, Architect Sharon Rose Alcaldia. When you were hired by Sheikh Mohammed bin Rashid, how is he as a boss or employer? Did you bring an all Filipino team as well? Were you able to design the master plan of Dubai? I have been to Jebel Ali up to Deira, and I think it was planned well. They just have really bad traffic.
Yeah, it's the father of Sheikh Mohammed, Sheikh Rashid bin Said Al Maktoum. He's really the founder, visionary founder of modern Dubai. And of course, not all plans are perfect. But one thing in Dubai, the plans we did, they keep updating it, modernizing it. And just like many cities in the world, I think the automobile is the culprit for all this congestion. That's why in Dubai, they did the metro, the LRT. And with the congestion charging in Dubai, uh, expensive parking charges, and the elevated walkways connecting to the metro stations, also to Burj Khalifa, it's people are encouraged to take the mass transit. But Dubai is one of the highest cars more cars than population maybe in Dubai. That's why it's very difficult to impose it. And they can afford the congestion charging. Like every time you enter Dubai from Sharjah, Al Ain, from Abu Dhabi, I think you pay something like 50 pesos. And every time you cross the bridges across Dubai Creek, you pay something like that. And all rapidly growing cities in the world, you cannot solve traffic. We just call it, you can alleviate traffic, but you cannot solve it. You can reduce the impact of traffic. And Dubai is, I think, 90% expatriate population, only 10% locals. I hope I was able to answer that question.
Okay. Oh, yes, that makes sense. And there is another question here, Architect June. It says from UAP Alabang, Architect
Hmm.
Juan. Good evening, Architect. You mentioned that other countries are putting premium on waterfront developments. How did those countries controlled or regulated their development so that it would not compromise the environment?
Yeah, actually, in the Philippines, we have laws like 10 meters setback from the river. And we have designed for Pasig River 10 meters promenade. And in fact, Daniel Burnham planned Manila in 1905, Chicago 1909 in Baguio, San Francisco, and the revised master plan for Washington, D.C. If we follow the City Beautiful principles of Daniel Burnham, perhaps Metro Manila will be as nice as Chicago, and so on. We have laws not being implemented. So we won the development master plan for Pasig River, 27 kilometers of it. I reported that the number one violator of the 10-meter setback for Pasig River is Malacanang. Even that time, Malacanang had no sewage treatment plant. So I said that the government should be the exemplar, not the exempted. Singapore, the government is the exemplar, not the exempted. I learned that from uh, Mayor Richard Daley of Chicago in a conversation with him. I asked him, "What's your style of governance?" And he said, "The government must be the exemplar, not the exempted." So all public buildings in Chicago, they must be the first to address climate change. Rainwater harvesting from the roof garden, solar roof, and so on. And that's his style governance. And I think Singapore is the same. Alabang chapter, I'm a co-founder of the UAP Alabang. Master Plan of Ayala Alabang, I was part of it, and so on. Alabang Town Center. And thank you for that question.
All right. Well, I hope that answers your question, Architect Juan. And next question, I'd just like to piggyback or echo on what you said, architect, about re-century, re-architecture, redesigning, and I've heard from the previous. I've been hearing a lot of those kind of information from the previous webinar series, because of the pandemic. I know we have been forever changed by the virus, and this leads to the question that says, what is the future of green buildings in the Philippines, from architect Carmelito Tatlonghari?
Yeah, uh, this morning I was one of the speakers in the Philippine Green Building Council, and it's the challenges of the Philippines is like elsewhere in the world, green building materials, green architecture, green engineering, and so on. There are tax incentives, but in our country, they tax heavily anything imported or even if it's environment friendly, green and sustainable building materials. And and again, we've been advocating to look at that to be addressed. The projects we had that were able to have a LEED certified are tax-free buildings, like the last building of most recent building of Asian Development Bank, which we worked jointly with CPG Singapore, tax-free because it's ADB. The project we have inside economic zones like Clark, Subic, and PESA, registered Philippine Economic Zone Authority registered development business park are tax-free, and CHESA of Department of Tourism enterprise zones are also tax-free. Unfortunately, outside these economic zones, they are not tax exempted. And one thing also, our private developer clients, we have to re-educate them because developers here, again, the bottom line of profit, 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 never mind the environment, never mind the people. I'm sorry to say that because they only think of the first cost, the initial cost. They don't think of the long-term cost. And I keep saying, if you plan, design, and construct a building, maybe it takes about 5 years. 5 years. So I tell them, we design buildings to last 100 years. So the next 95 years, post-construction, management of the building are all savings. We were commissioned to do a university, a hospital, and three schools in Kathmandu, Nepal after the big earthquake. The Buddhist organization Chuchi, headquartered in Taiwan, the master founder of Chuchi, instructed me that the buildings we designed for Kathmandu, Nepal should last 40 generations, 1,000 years. And yet in our country, when I talk about 100 years, that's only 4 generations. People are very skeptical. And also, like many good buildings, even designed by national artists in Metro Manila, were demolished. So this morning, I said that when you construct a new building, the embodied energy footprint is 5%. New construction. When you demolish it, another 5%. When you construct again, another 5%. So we've done retrofit repurposed buildings in the Philippines, like the Manila Polo Club. We won the design competition for its redevelopment. We respected the original architecture, the facade, and we did not touch the historical part of the Manila Polo Club. And then the former Army Navy Club of the Americans in Luneta, it became a warehouse, bodega of City Hall, Manila, and we had it repurposed into a boutique hotel. So we lengthened the life of the building. And even in Metro Manila is now becoming the example, case study of how not to do it. Like we had urban sprawl in the middle of the city. Where else in the world you have a city with gated communities in the middle of the central business districts? Only in Metro Manila. And sometimes I feel like voice in the desert speaking out, and unfortunately, uh, whatever, those in the gated communities, I used to live in one of them, and many of my clients live there, and many friends and relatives. So we even have to re-educate our clients and our friends that at Harvard, the American Planning Association, AIA, which is a very active member, after the OPEC oil crisis of 1973, we said, or we concluded, if you have large single family home in the middle of the city, you have a larger, bigger environmental footprint because you're arrogating to yourself um, prime, uh, very prime urban land, uh, um, pricing out uh, Filipino families to live closer to their places of work. You're encouraging more urban sprawl to encroach into the forest and to the farms. So I compare, Rockwell is one of our projects. So at least the first 5 buildings and the master plan. Rockwell, at least the 5 buildings were designed, 200 families per hectare, very high income, vertical urbanism neighborhood. One of the gated communities in Makati is only 4 families per hectare. Who has a larger uh, environmental footprint? The 4 families per hectare or the 200 families per hectare? In Singapore, it's vertical urbanism and high density, and yet it has so many lungs of the cities and so on. It can be done. So that question of, I think I know Mr. Tatunga, I think it's a consultant for green buildings, is that it can be done. There should be more incentives and educating those who make the purchase decision, the judgment calls. Because we architects, we're only picumen. The purchase decision is the owner. So again, the owners, the clients, they own, most of the time they think only of the first costs, not the life cycle cost of the buildings. So we have to do a lot of re-educating. Since in our country, we still have this colonial mentality. West, the late Fabio Manyosa, his frustration he was sharing with me. Unfortunately, in our country, there's colonial baggage. West is best, imported is better. Local is not good enough. So even I say the same thing as a local and less educated architect, Chicago, New York, London, will say the same thing. They will believe the foreigner. That's something we have to do in our country. We have to disabuse the mind of the colonial mentality. Like Singapore, they're proud as Singaporeans. In our country, sometimes I feel like Filipino architects, engineers are second-class citizens in our own country. That's another advocacy that I'm working on. And hopefully with this pandemic, um, Winston Churchill said that never let a good crisis go away. This pandemic is a good crisis. We must learn from it. This is the opportunity now to correct our mistakes and addressing climate change. With this pandemic, it's really helping planet Earth breathe and so on. So we've been advocating also, I segue a little bit, tactical urbanism or guerrilla urbanism. We're advising mayors and leaders to make our cities now more walkable, bikeable. We do urban farming, plant. And Singapore, with a small island country, I think #1 in the world in urban agriculture. The Philippines, 8,000 hectares of Metro Manila is vacant. So I was talking to the mayor of Quezon City last night that maybe you tax idle land or you do urban agriculture in those vacant lots and share the income with the vacant landowner. So many things can be done. And Filipino expats, you're so exposed to the best practices in the world. Send it to the Philippines. You write again letters to the editor or send it to my email and I'll quote you in my articles. Yeah, thank you for that question.
All right, thank you, Architect. Yeah, I remember one of your articles because I've read through your articles before this webinar series, and you mentioned about uh, that pandemic giving us a chance to correct past planning mistakes. So that really makes sense. And I
Every
think, yeah, go ahead.
every every Thursday, I write an article at Manila Times, more about architecture, environment, urban development. Every Thursday, ManilaTimes.net. Every
Okay.
Thursday. In fact, this one is transportation, mobility, and traffic, something like that.
I think I've read your article from the Business Mirror about that
Business Mirror.
certain
Sometimes I get,
topic.
yeah.
Okay. Well, another question, Architect June. I think this is more of like leadership and people management from UAP QC Central. Architect Mario Stefan. I couldn't read the last name; it's truncated, but it says you said you would rather have your firm labeled as most admired than biggest in the Philippines. This meaning sticking to your principles. How difficult is this in terms of staff, since all architects under your firm should also have the same thinking.
Yeah, it's really like our core values. We have 10 core values, and I tell them our core values are like lighthouses, even in a stormy weather. They will always be there to guide us. So never compromise. Even in this pandemic, of course, we're all trying to survive. So I remind our colleagues, our staffers, that we should stick to our principles, the mission, vision, values of the company. And our in our core values, number one is professionalism, honesty, integrity. One of them is elevating the global standing of the Filipino professional, the environment, business orientation, and interfaith spirituality. About 10 of them. And I tell my colleagues, our staffers, that every line you draw, if we do a good job, think of the beneficiaries. If you do a lousy job, think of the sufferers. And everything we do, we don't just plan and design so many square meters of floor area, so many hectares of land. We look at the beneficiaries. How many people will benefit? So again, the principle of people first, planet Earth. Then we can talk about profit, prosperity, culture, history, and heritage, and spirituality. So all of this, like this 44 billion square meters of land area we have planned in 40 countries, or 16 million square meters of building floor area, we can calculate how many people have benefit from our planning. And one thing is, I'd like to be a good ancestor for future generations. And again, quotation from Daniel Burnham: make big plans, make no little plans. Remember that our sons and daughters will do things that will stagger us. So everything we do, like unfortunately, we did not have time to show. Even during this pandemic, when we're not too busy at Palafox, we take pictures of the uglification of our cities and do architectural perspectives, urban design perspectives. I call them postcards from the future. So hopefully, future generations of leaders will implement these postcards from the future. And I used to send them to mayors during their birthdays. Instead of writing a complaint, take picture of the ugliness of their city, and a nice architectural perspective on how they should look like. And most of them hired us for land use, zoning, urban renewal, urban design of their cities. And we got so many clients by doing that. You could do the same in Singapore. Little things like the pedestrian crosswalk. All our pedestrian crosswalk, even in Makati, are not international standards. Look at your signages. Elsewhere in the world, including Singapore, you have advanced informational sign, advanced directional sign, then confirmatory sign. What will be Metro Manila? Confirmatory sign. It says there, do not enter. It's too late for you to look for another route. Then the policeman is waiting for you to catch you, because we don't have the advanced informational sign, advanced directional sign. We only have the confirmatory sign. Sometimes the confirmatory sign is not even readable. So there's a policeman entrapping motorists and so on. That's also part of corruption, is to get money from you. So,
Well,
so
I
many
could.
things.
Yeah, go ahead, sir.
Go ahead. Yeah.
I know I couldn't agree more about those signages getting you trapped with, with the police traffic and all that. And yeah, it's really some, as they say, picture tells a thousand words, right? So yeah, that's a good idea when we take ugly
Yeah.
photos of the surroundings and report it directly to the authorities. So yeah.
I usually argue with the policeman, like like changing lanes, because there was no advanced informational and so on. So I told the policeman, where's the advanced informational sign, advanced directional sign? And the policeman will say, kayo pa ang galit, sige na nga. Then a parking sign, I think Chinatown, no parking on both sides. No parking on both sides. So I told the policeman, I cannot park in both sides because I only have one car. So the sign is wrong. No parking on both sides. It should have been no parking on either side. So even even the narrative, our signages are
Okay.
substandard internationally.
All right. Well, another question, architect from UAP Singapore, architect Joan De Leon Tabinas. Good evening, architect June. What can you say about the plan of Philippine government with regard to sustainability?
Yeah, we have the narrative, but implementing rules and regulations and incentives is very lacking. And and even these green buildings, it's the foreign investors that require uh, green buildings, LEED certified, Verde certified, well certified, and so on. It's usually the multinationals looking for that, and just the narrative of climate change, sustainability, resilience, and so on. We've written 3 books. The last book that we wrote is Towards More Resilient Cities and Communities. Got sold out. It was there about 18 disasters. My message there is uh, address the hazard before they become disasters. It's 90% less expensive aside from saving lives and so on. That book got sold out, and I got the Best Author Award for the professions for that book. And I think we architects should write. If you look back the past 100 years, Frank Lloyd Wright, Le Corbusier, and all those top architects in the past century, they were all writers. They don't design or draw. They write. And they were also controversial. Like the German architects who migrated away from Germany because of Hitler, they did a lot of writing. And being abroad, you should do that. And in fact, now I'm 70 years old. I'm planning to write more books with working from home and so on. Again, they ask you a question, what's the most expensive real estate in the world? Can you answer that?
I guess the question is, what is the price if they get it right, sir? I'm just kidding.
You know what's the most expensive real estate in the world? The cemetery. So much wisdom and brain buried in the cemetery. So that maybe before we leave this earth, our legacy should be our brain power, our wisdom, share it to future generations. Let's all be good ancestors to future generations. So the cemetery for me is the most expensive real estate in the world. It's not Manhattan, it's not Mecca,
Oh,
it's not London, not Paris, it's the cemetery.
well said. Well said. Okay. Well, let's move on to the next question. It says from Architect Larshir Mangaliman. Good evening, Architect Palafox. Thank you for gracing tonight's webinar. My question is, amongst the hundreds and thousands of projects you've been involved and designed, which is your most favorite and which would you consider is the peak or turning point of your career? Again, from Architect Larshir of UAP Singapore chapter.
Yeah. Thank you for inviting me, Architect Lars here, and pursuing that I'll be here tonight to have this conversation with you. My usual answer is the next one. Because when I mention one project, the other clients practically complain to me, even in our books, like we could accommodate only maybe 200 projects, but with more than 1,600 projects, we cannot accommodate all of them unless we write 10 more books. And maybe what I can mention is the architecture for the poor. We've been doing projects for the poor, like green architecture for the poor. I'm not really for relocation outside the cities. I'd rather have inside uh, improvements on site. So we've been making proposal in architectural design drawings for along esteros, like get the setback of 3.5 meters and give green architecture to the urban core. Vertical vegetable gardens like Ampalaya and all of that with green roof and rainwater harvesting as well. And also architecture for the poor again, the ATAS, Gawad Kalinga. So when I was told that I was given pro bono service, I said, there's value to it. I call it philanthropic architecture or patriotic architecture. And then one more that maybe I can mention is, of course, the projects we do post-disasters, like the schools in Bam, Iran after the big earthquake, at Mandu, Sri Lanka after the Indian Ocean tsunami. And one thing that may be unique is the largest mosque in the country, funded by the Sultan of Brunei, the Grand Mosque in Cotabato. Supposed to be mosque, places of worship for the Muslims, to be done by Muslim architects. I'm not a Muslim and it's hard to do that. And it's really the green architecture principles were there, cross ventilation, natural light, and so on. We brought it there. And it's part of the peacemaking initiatives also. In fact, in 2006, I was given an award in New York as Ambassador of Goodwill, Ambassador for Peace, because of our projects in Bam, Iran, were uh, funded by Buddhists from Taiwan to benefit the Muslim children of Iran, and they hired me. They hired Palafox Associates, Christian Catholic architects, to design those buildings, those schools, which again we are asked to design for an earthquake that has not happened in Iran. Intensity 10. Even the building code only, I think 7.5 intensity. So those are projects that close to my heart. And the awards I've been getting is not for the high-rise buildings, large-scale developments that we've been architects. It's for those, for humanity, for the environment, for the poor, and so on. And I think maybe we should aspire not to be successful, but to be significant, so that once we leave this earth, payback for the oxygen we breathe in the air, for the pollution we may given to planet Earth and so on. Part of payback. So doing good designs, writing books and so on for future generations should be part of that legacy. And thank you again, Architect Larcy, Mangaliman, for making sure we have this conversation. I hope I was able to give that answer to you, the right answer. So my favorite one would be the next one, because we can learn from all our previous projects. We should always keep improving.
All right, and it should always feels like it's your first day, as they say
Yeah,
that.
that's correct.
Okay. Well, next question. I think this is very relevant and timely, Architect, and I hope you can share your thoughts. It says from UAPQC Silangan, Architect Horacio. Good evening, Architect Palafox. What can you say, sir, about the controversial dolomite sand in the development of the Manila Bay seashore?
You know, I've been asked that by the media, and to me, it's really we should look at it more objectively. Dolomite, I'm not a medical expert whether it's cancerous or not, but I wish that the 190-kilometer shoreline of Manila Bay becomes an artificial beach. But before you do that, we should have a sewer interceptor. So the wastewater, the sewers going to Manila Bay must be caught by the sewer interceptor with sewage treatment plants. Singapore's doing that before it reaches. And in fact, we've given so many recommendations to DNR already. Manila Bay Walk, and underneath the Bay Walk are the sewer lines and sewage treatment plants. And and uh, and that beach, putting it there, it's one of the uh, uh, saving Manila Bay, because for the past almost 4 decades, Manila Bay has been made like a septic tank. So, as I said, city beautiful, move principles, it should also be city efficient principles. So, it's 2 years from election, and I think part of this criticism is part of electioneering. I think we should help each other, Filipinos, just like the Singaporeans, they help each other. In fact, I spoke to DNR Secretary Simato about this, and he explained. So I said, I was interviewed also in the media twice already, and I said, I haven't seen that. The last time I was at Manila Bay was I was a volunteer for the Save Manila Bay, January last year. And my wish is we make an artificial beach the whole 190 kilometers. But at first, we should make sure wastewater is treated before it reaches the beach or Manila Bay. And Waikiki Beach in Honolulu, that's artificial beach uh, put in there by Conrad Hilton Hotels. The Again, Palm Islands, Dubai, those are artificial beach. So I think we should help each other as Filipinos. Let's not be caught up with the election fever and so on. So there are two schools of thought right now. Don't do it. Then, uh, Einstein said, some people will see a problem for every solution you make. So every solution you make, somebody will find a problem to that solution. I think we should help everyone. So I don't. The beach itself, for me, it's good. The use of dolomite, I'm not an expert on that. And I said also, before you do the artificial beach in Manila Bay, a coastal engineering study should be done. And I was told by DNR, they did some engineering interventions as well. So I wish like we had so many proposals already: River Walk, Bay Walk, Laguna Lake Walk, and beachfront for all the waterfront of the Philippines. So for me, I don't know whether it's really sincere criticism, constructive criticism, or part of the 2022 elections, which is very unfortunate that we have. So if it's not done properly, I think we should volunteer ourselves. If you are a sanitary engineer, you should maybe do a crusade advocacy, also volunteer your services to the sewer segment, sewer lines underneath the Baywalk. And there's a mandamus, Supreme Court, I think 10, 20 years ago, even the local governments were penalized by Supreme Court because of the pollution of Manila Bay. And Secretary Simato is an action man, like Boracay. We did the master plans for Boracay year 1991. We were paid by the European Community for Boracay. Then 2006 by the Department of Tourism. And more recently, before it was closed down, we did another master plan for Boracay. And after 30 years, it's only now that it was implemented. And it was Secretary Simato who did that. And Secretary Simato does not, it's not a loquacious politician. He's a soldier and he's an action man. So let's give him the benefit of the doubt. And Mayor Isko even said, supposing they put black sand, would there be any criticism if they put black sand? So I think we should look at all of this objectively with clinical detachment. Unfortunately, especially with social media, there are good news, bad news, and fake news. And for me, I would not pass judgment yet unless I see it in detail. Because I've seen it as around the world, artificial beach. And we should have more democratic space, especially for the urban poor. And people like us, some of us, were members of country clubs, golf clubs, sports clubs. How about the urban poor from Tondo? I've been proposing the Intramuros golf course should be opened up, give it as an open space for the urban poor, instead for a few golfers. Elsewhere in the world, historical walls can be touched. In Jerusalem, they pray on the walls of Jerusalem. Everywhere in the world, everybody can touch historical walls. In Intramuros, only the ghost balls can touch it. So we should have more democratic space in our country, especially for the marginalized, the poorest of the poor. So I would not pass judgment on that. So Dolomite, I'm not an expert, medical expert at that. But the principle of making even an artificial beachfront the whole 190 kilometers of Manila Bay. Dubai only had 70 kilometers of waterfront. So they had to create artificial beach, artificial waterfronts. And thank you for that question. It's a hot issue right now. I just got the call to be interviewed by ANC 7 o'clock in the morning tomorrow. I don't know what's the topic. Probably Manila Bay again.
All right. Well, yeah, it's very beautifully said. So hindi judgmental si Architect June, and let's leave the crabs in the mud and in the sea, not do it or make it a mentality. All right. Another question from Architect Victoriano Lindo. Are there any news regarding urban planning department in the Philippines? Meron po bang posibilidad na ma-centralize ang building construction control, same as here in Singapore? And lastly, ano pong mapapayo nyo sa mga Filipino architects na mahiyain to boost their confidence as a professional?
Yeah, I think with this digital infrastructure, I've been pushing for that also. And I've been elected this year as one of the directors of the Philippine Chamber of Commerce and Industry, and I'm director. And I've been thinking about really improving the digital infrastructure. Like I think Singapore and Dubai, you can apply for building permits through the internet. It, in Dubai, it's being done. I don't know about Singapore. And so it's more transparent, it's quicker, you save on blueprints and so on. And I've been pushing for that. I hope the United Architects of the Philippines can push for it also. One person cannot push for it. And digital infrastructure is quite needed here. Like Singapore, I said a while ago, the Philippines is 400 times the size of Singapore. And I think Singapore, you have 5 service providers. In the Philippines, we only have 2, only Smart and Globe. So if we have more in digital infrastructure, it could even give meaning to the Balik Provincia. If we only have good digital infrastructure, I'd rather work from home from the beach of Boracay, Siargao, Ilocos for our projects all over the world or for projects in Makati. Digital infrastructure. Again, addressing, as I said, when I was president of Management Association of the Philippines, addressing corruption, criminality, and climate change. And then digital infrastructure would reduce red tape. And in fact, in my lectures and speaking engagement, I talk about 6 kinds of infrastructure. Progressive infrastructure, these are the international airports, international seaports. You have that in Singapore, they have that in Dubai and Hong Kong. Progressive infrastructure, international airports, seaports, international schools, hospitals, hotels. Those are progressive infrastructure. The second kind is hard infrastructure. That's what we know in the Philippines. Build, build, build. Roads and utilities, not even complete. Then soft infrastructure, the ease of doing business. No red tape, no corruption. Then you have green infrastructure, sustainable infrastructure. I think we all know that. Then the Internet of Things, artificial intelligence, digital infrastructure. Then you have institutional infrastructure. Singapore has those institutions to implement those good plans. I've met your Urban Development Authority and all. They're very good leaders that we can learn from Singapore. But at least in advocacy, there should be a group of architects, not a single architect. Because like me, I've been vulnerable to so many libel cases for fighting corruption. But sometimes I succeed. I put a BIR examiner 7 years in prison. They entrapping him because I've been paying correct taxes ever since I became an architect. And they tried to extort money from me. So I reported to the MBI. I gave money with fluorescent powder. They were, the NBI agents arrested him. He got 7 years in prison. And I think I was again the first architect who ever did that. To do that, I tell mayors one of the most uh, corruption in our country is building industry, getting permits, approvals. I think there's about 30 signatures for permits here. Environmental clearance, vocational clearance, building permits, occupancy permit, fire permit, and so on. And when I was in Dubai, round table, there's 77 to 81 representatives from the planning department, architecture department, traffic, building official, utilities. In one round table, we approve, and everybody says approve. We just put no objection, certificates. And I've been pushing for that in the Philippines for, I think, since 1973. I was 23 years old. I'm already 70 years old.
Okay. And another question, all the way from Baguio, from UAP Baguio, Chelsea, Architect Chelsea. Good evening, Architect Palafox. In relation to planning, how can urban planning take part in Philippine cities that exceeded its carrying capacity like Baguio City?
Yes, yeah, good question. In fact, I've been wanting to. Well, I'm not American, but I chair the Urban Development and Environment Committee of the American Chamber of Commerce, the Philippines. And I've been telling our American Chamber that why don't we revisit the Daniel Burnham plan for Baguio? The Daniel Burnham plans for Baguio and Manila were not followed, unlike in Chicago, they followed it. So in 1973, I've been talking about development threshold. There are thresholds to development. It's not only Baguio, even Makati. 1990, 1 year after I left Ayala as chief architect, they changed the density floor area ratio from times 4 to times 16, 4 times. The capacity of Makati Central Business District did not increase 4 times. And yet the density, the traffic generation increased 4 times. So is Baguio. The sewage treatment capacity of Baguio, I think, was based on the plans of Daniel Burnham. I'm not sure if they were added. But one thing with Baguio, you have a good mayor, General Magalong. In fact, the other day, again, through the American Chamber of Commerce, we spoke to the, I think, head of tourism in Baguio and the Cordilleras about promoting Baguio. Baguio is opening now for domestic tourism, and, and the carry capacity should be addressed. And I proposed a planning, I think they're adopting it already. The mountain provinces and the Ilocos region, from ridge to reef. So the mountain provinces, the ridge, Baguio, to ridge, to reef, the coastline of Ilocos. You have the highlands, the midlands, the lowlands, and the coastline. Integrated planning. And Region 1, Ilocos, and mountain provinces, they will have easier access to each other. So I think Baguio, with the leadership right now, there's a good chance. So architects and planners in Baguio should speak up, and I could join you in fact. I've met the mayor of Baguio, and I even had projects in Baguio like the Club John Hay. I work on the master plan of that for the private sector and the golf course community with Jack Nicklaus. And even the golf course in John Hay, I was able to preserve many pine trees, which Jack Nicklaus wanted to cut them down, and I opposed it. So I was able to save so many trees. It became part of the challenge of the golf course, retaining so many trees. And also in Baguio, it could be the first in the Philippines in forest bathing, Janhay Forest in Baguio. And we could have that in the Philippines. It's very popular in places like Japan and even in Athens, a forest bathing in the middle of the city. Yesterday, I proposed that to Mayor Belmonte of Quezon City, because Quezon City and Metro Manila has the most number of urban forests, parks, and open spaces. So development thresholds should be respected, like what has been uh, implemented recently in Boracay. We're currently doing the tourism master plan for Siargao and Corregidor. We're also doing a development threshold analysis. Because in our part of the world, unfortunately, it's It's really profit, profit, profit. Never mind the people, never mind the environment. Profit, profit, profit.
Okay.
To take advantage or to really introduce reforms in planning and development. Thank you for that question. It's reminding me also of lessons learned in the past 48 years.
Right. Thank you. And since you mentioned about Ilocos, here comes a question from all the way from Ilocos, vegan from Architect Eric. Good evening, Architect Palafox. In your point of view, what are the factors to consider nowadays in urban planning with regard to pandemic?
Can you repeat? Somebody's calling me here. Anyway, what is the? Can you repeat the question, please?
He was asking if, from your point of view, what are the factors to consider nowadays in urban planning with regard to pandemic?
Yeah, right now, architecture should be all buildings now should be like a healthcare facility, like Le Corbusier. All the buildings, even multifamily dwellings done by Le Corbusier, natural sunlight and ventilation. Leave it away from the ground. So right now, I've been a resource speaker with the Philippine Franchising Association of shopping mall developers and restaurants. Like for restaurants, my calculation is that maybe 30% for kitchen area, 20% for indoor dining, 50% for outdoor dining, al fresco. And then for condominiums now, I think we can learn from Singapore. More balconies, more natural light, and so on. And then for cities, we have what we call tactical urbanism or guerrilla urbanism. Walkable, bikeable, uh, linear parks, more open spaces, sanity walk, because people now are getting crazy. So we should have more open spaces and walkable spaces. And, and there are 20 kinds of urban transport. The first modes of transportation should be walking and bicycle. Unfortunately, many ministries of transportation, public works department do not consider walking and biking as urban transport. And that's a lesson learned after the OPEC oil crisis of 1973. Most progressive cities in the world, they make their cities more walkable, bikeable, and penalize the use of cars. You cannot penalize the ownership of cars, but you can penalize the use of cars. Like Singapore, it's expensive to buy a car. You have to assure the permitting agency that you have a garage to put your car, and you're penalized to use the car during peak hours. So all of these best practices of the world, and especially Filipino expatriate architects, you can write them down. And as I said, get my email, june_palafox at palafoxsources.com. I will quote you in my articles or affirmation of what we're really advocating.
All right. Well, I hope later on we can flash on the screen your email address, architect, so all the participants can write down the email in case they want to reach out to you after this webinar. Okay, so yeah, another question from Architect Rogelio Santos from UAP Baresma in chapter. Hi, sir. However, there are many architects who are aspiring to take up environmental planning to be an expert on it, yet there are limited number of schools who are offering such course, which is only Metro Manila. Of course, nowadays there is but only virtual education. Do you think we can be able to establish more specialization institutes, not only in Manila, but also in suburban areas?
Yeah, I would encourage that. In fact, I've been saying to the country's Metro Manila, all these big universities, instead of adding more classrooms, they add more dormitories within the campus and new classrooms and colleges. They should go to the provinces outside Metro Manila. And then with this digital education, I hope they improve the digital infrastructure. There should be uh, better ways now. In fact, I'm very surprised that I was made chairman of the board of advisors of the newly launched College of Architecture and Design and the Run Colleges in Fort Bonifacio. And it's a new school for architecture and design. And I've been telling the ones who invited me to chair the board of advisors to put up also environmental planning, regional planning. It's a good thought. Maybe I'll write to the different universities in the provinces and we can do an education online. Because I'd like to share, because as I said a while ago, during the start, I was a lecturer of MIT and Harvard before I became student of Harvard. And I've taken up 8 courses in Harvard, a diploma in advanced management in real estate development, and special courses on architecture and sustainability, master planning and sustainability, the art of leadership in architecture, where my professors were Eugene Cohn of Confederation Fox and Art Gensler of Gensler. And I've taken 8 special courses in Harvard, which I would like to share, especially in the provinces. And helping the provinces will even help Metro Manila. In fact, the mistakes of Metro Manila, I was saying before the pandemic, only in Metro Manila do we have OFWs. Because the employees of Makati CBD, Ortigas, and Fort Bonifacio spend 5 to 6 hours a day in traffic. So they're away from their families 5 to 6 hours a day. So I've been trying to advocate really urban regional development outside Metro Manila. And the government is listening, but it's not as fast as they should. They should give more incentive for industries, schools, even maybe even call centers to relocate outside Metro Manila. So that's a good question. Maybe we list down. In fact, we have a new project ongoing now. Batangas State University. It will be the first PESA registered business park in the country inside the university campus. We won the architectural design competition for 6 buildings of the Batangas State University KISS Park, Knowledge, Innovation, Science, Technology Park, with a hotel and convention center, and tax-free for bringing in green architecture building materials. So I hope many of the universities in the country can do that. Actually, we can work together. Fellow architects in the Philippines, we can work together. I can just be, or Palafox can just be the architectural master planning design consultants, and our colleagues, architects in the provinces, you can be the architect of record. So we can get involved in the pre-design program, the conceptual and the schematic. We can work together. When it comes to the design development and contract documents and supervision, you can do it. Especially now, it's very expensive to travel or very challenging to travel with all of these uh, health and security passes. We have now offices in Makati, Cebu, and Davao, and we're looking for collaborating architects all over the country. And we have no more offices abroad, so we're more focused in the Philippines now. It's part of our paying back to our country. It's a good question. Maybe the whole Philippines, fellow architects, look at opportunities, then we can work together, especially we can do it online. Just like our projects in 40 countries, before I would visit them and we do the design in our Makati offices and for projects elsewhere in the world. 6 American states, all the United Arab Emirates, Saudi Arabia, uh, Kazakhstan, and so on. And even countries I haven't visited, a house of an architect in Anchorage, Alaska, he asked us to design his house. A big time architect in Saudi Arabia, he let us design his house. So what further affirmation can you get when a fellow architect asks you to design his house? We can do that. Let's work together. In fact, with this pandemic, there should be more partnership and collaboration. Thank you for that question. I segued a little bit. It's a very good question.
Well, that's correct. I guess if there's good news about this pandemic, great people like you are, coming home, coming together to make great projects, and I guess that's something that we should be thankful for. And if we can push for that environmental planning education, not just in Manila but also in suburban places, I'm sure Architect Rogelio will be the happiest participant here, sir.
Yeah, you can get my, again, I'll share you uh, our emails later. Even I don't mind sharing you my phone numbers. So easy to remember. Plus six zero plus 6391 88 11 11. +639188111111. That's my smartphone. For my globe phone, +63 9178 55 7777. Then June_Palafox at palafoxassociates.com. We have several emails like uh, urbanplan at palafoxassociates.com, masterplan@palafoxassociates.com, the architectural studios 1234 at palafoxassociates.com, engineering at palafoxassociates.com, specifications at palafoxassociates.com. We are on the web, uh, www.palafoxassociates.com and palafoxarchitecture.com. So we have two companies, Palafox Architecture and Palafox.
Okay. Oh, Architect June, are you still there? Is she still with us? Is he still with us? Okay, so guys, I hope that you were able to take note of the contact information of Architect June, but in any event that you are not able to take note of that, he is searchable in Google for sure.
He's here na. Nandito na siya ulit.
Okay. Architect June?
Can you hear me now? I was on mute.
You're back, sir.
Yeah, thank you.
All right. Few more questions. Well, guys, since again, as much as we want to accommodate all the questions that you've raised here in the chat group, we have very much limited time. So what we're going to do is to take note of all the questions, send it to Architect June, and if there is a way for Architect June to reach out to you or to all the participants and send his answer, we'll be gladly do that for you. But for now, another question from a student, future architect Raish or Rashi Zidon. Good evening, Architect Palafox, and to all architects in this webinar. I'm still a student, and it comes to my realization that there's so much potential for the Philippines to make a global impact. Any advice on what I can do
Okay.
as a starting step to make a difference? And I'm still on that journey on finding my advocacy. Were you able to get the question, Architect June?
I, we got cut off. Jonathan, no? Jonathan, what was the question?
Yes.
Yeah.
A question coming from a student. She said uh, she is still a student, and it comes to her realization that there's so much potential for the Philippines to make a global impact. Any advice on what she can do as a starting step to make a difference? And she's still on that journey on finding her advocacy.
A lot of opportunities. When I was in college, we had, although I belong to several organizations, including ROTC and so on, there was one organization, I don't know if it's still there, Society for Better Environment. That could be one advocacy. And we had a client also, and unfortunately the founder, former Jesse Chris, passed away already, Urban Poor Associates. And we've been helping them in the informal settlers area like Tondo and so on. And in fact, we got featured by BBC of London. We went there, and part of my architecture for humanity, architecture for urban poor. In fact, it's the most challenging. And even right now, I've spoken out with this social distancing, physical distancing. I've been encouraging even government. The urban poor, they live in 9 square meter shanties, 5 members of the household. So that's less than 2 square meters per person. So how can you have social distancing? So I've been encouraging policy decision makers, these urban poor, let them work outside under the sunlight, clean the esteros, tree planting, make sidewalks, bike lanes, and so on. instead of coop up in less than 2 square meters per person. The more they will get this virus and so on. So that could be one advocacy. Architecture for the poor, architecture for humanity, democratic architecture, inclusive architecture. And as a student, I belong to so many organizations. During our time, it was even the first quarter storm. I was a student activist at the time, National University student. And I was a member of the Central Board students of the whole University of Santo Tomas and so on. So as a student, don't get stuck to your architectural box. Get out of that box and so on. There's a lot to learn. One more thing, ever since hello, I'm back. Hello.
Yes, you're back,
Okay,
sir.
we got disconnected again. Yeah, what was the last question? I answered the student. Yeah.
Yes, architect.
All right.
So I
Yun.
guess we have one last question that we can entertain for us for the whole night. So it's coming from UAP Singapore, Charmaine Aureliosa, Architect Charmaine. Good, and this is very timely as well. So it says, "Good evening, Architect Palafox. What can you say about the Court of Appeals decision on the Philippine Institute of Civil Engineers claim that they are allowed by law to sign and seal architectural plans and architectural documents? It is clearly a false claim. Here in Singapore, it is mandatory that in order for you to obtain building permits, you need to obtain first architectural building plan approval signed by a licensed architect and structural plan approval signed by a licensed civil or structural engineer, separately and concurrently." What can you say about that?
Yeah. In our firm, we have architects, environmental planners, structural engineers, civil engineers, sanitary engineers, because we are multidisciplinary. So as principal architect, I sign all those documents, co-signed by structural engineer, sanitary engineer, mechanical, electrical, interior designer, as principal architect or planner. And we really have to love before it. Because I was in Dubai, I joined to invite work in Dubai, 1977. Time architectural plans were done by engineers, and it was in our time that we were able to set rules. Architectural plans should be designed by architects, structural plans by structural engineers, military, mechanical, electrical, fire protection, and so on. And in 1977, we were able to succeed in Dubai because we were from 14 countries, 20 of us, architects, planners, engineers at that time. And in the Philippines, unfortunately, again, we have so many, I'm sorry, in fact,
All right, kapit lang guys. Architect June will be back in a very short while.
yeah, sorry we got disconnected again. For me, I don't agree with it, but I think we should do more persuasion. And maybe uh, the UAP and PIA should work together, and the Board of Architecture at PRC together. And champions from the legislature, executive branch of government, and the judiciary. These are all of these were in the 60s. After the 60s, the rest of the world now for architectural plans, engineers and engineering plans. Hello.
Yes, architect.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah.
So, okay.
Yeah. I don't agree with the ruling. UAP, PIA, and Board of Architecture PRC should work together. We have to re-educate our judges, our policy decision makers. Yeah, because engineers can do functional buildings, but they cannot do aesthetically pleasing buildings. Maybe part of the uglification of our cities, because anybody can sign architectural plans.
Okay. Well, thank you for sharing your thoughts on that very controversial and timely issue. And we've been seeing a lot of side comments and takeaways from our participants. Let me read through some of them. It says, aspiring to be significant more than success is a great takeaway. Sewer interceptor, a lot of good words. Well, there's so many questions that have not been answered yet, but again, we will try to forward all these to Architect June, and we will find a way for you to get the answers for these questions raised. So at this point, we'd like to thank you, Architect June, for your time today and what you've talked about tonight with all the participants. We hope that you inspire and give, raise awareness in terms of working abroad. And maybe, I guess, I can throw a last question for tonight. I guess I would just want to know what is your message or advice you can give to those young architects, no, who are just starting up with their career and planning to explore their career outside the Philippines, just like you, and then coming home uh, in no time once they become successful.
Yeah, one is really, yeah, it's like a motherhood statement. It's really hard work and be creative. And one thing that I don't know if I said it a while ago, since freshman architecture, everywhere I go, I reimagine. Somebody gives me a big eraser and asks me to redo it again, whether it's a hotel, shopping malls, a house, and so on. If I given the chance, how could I do it better than the architect who did this, even the urban planner who did this? How could I have done it any better? And one more thing is, that's probably why we're not a profitable company. I require at least 3 alternative designs for any project. And if I myself am not satisfied, we've gone as far as 25 alternative designs for a shopping mall, 12 alternative designs for a condominium, and so on. Because to me, I'd rather see my mistakes on paper than see it in concrete. And we architects, whatever mistakes we do, even after we're gone, that mistake will always be there. Unlike other professions, I will not mention it anymore, they can bury their mistakes, but not architects. It will always be there as a monument of your good design or a monument of your bad design. And always looking ahead. Me, I think I've been trained to be always looking ahead. And the plans and design we do, I tell my colleagues at Palafox also, immediate action. What can be done within the next 100 days? Term, long term, and vision. And work hard, study very hard. Yeah. And, and architecture is not an easy profession. I've written, I think, about more than 500 quotable quotes among famous architects. And if you can also write books, as they say, when you leave this world, the more fortunate ones, you must have designed the buildings, plant a tree, have children, and write a book. And I think that's it. Right now, one thing about our architectural schools in the Philippines is unlike, if I may again, Harvard Graduate School Design. It's really, you have to have the storyline, the narrative for every line you draw. And what I mentioned a while ago again, if you do a good design, think of the beneficiaries. If you do a bad design, think of the sufferers, including a handicap ramp. You forget to put it, maybe the first sufferers will be your grandmother, and so on. Always think ahead, think forward, and so on. And honesty, integrity, professionalism, people first, planet Earth, then we can talk about profit and prosperity, not just profit, profit, profit. And then culture, history, and heritage, spirituality. Everything we do is pro Deo, for God, patria, for our country, et terra, for planet Earth. Everything we do. Thank you for the opportunity to share, and I love this conversation. And thank you for the questions.
Beautifully said, Architect Jung, and a lot of takeaways for sure for tonight. And having said that, we would like to present to you your virtual certificate of appreciation. So you want to flash it on the screen right now.
Thank you.
All right, let me read what is written on the virtual certificate. And by the way, we will send this to your hard copy of the certificate to your address, Architect June.
Thank you, sir.
You're welcome. So I'm just waiting for the virtual certificate to appear on the screen.
How many attended,
We have
participated?
over 300, to be exact, 308 participants who are
That's
on
good.
Zoom right now. And so far, for me, that's the biggest number of participants I've attended in. So congratulations to all the organizers.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah.
Okay, so shall we flash the certificate on the screen?
Wait lang po.
Okay. So, Architect June, what keeps you busy nowadays now that it's pandemic and that I suppose you're just staying at home?
Yeah, working from, I went to the office this morning, and I think we still have about more than 50 projects.
Whoa.
Planning, architecture, interior design, engineering, master plan, and so on.
Okay.
And we also have our advocacies and crusades. Yeah.
So it looks like new normal doesn't apply to you.
I don't think we have a new normal. The new world order started March 16,
Okay,
and I think it will be a better normal. The
better
new
normal.
world.
Okay. So here it goes. In behalf of United Architects of the Philippines, Union ng mga Arkitekto ng Pilipinas, Singapore Chapter, Certificate of Appreciation is presented to Architect Felino Palafox Jr. And I couldn't read well because it's blurred.
It's okay. I can read it. It's okay.
Okay. Well, for imparting his valuable insight and inspirations as the webinar speaker during the 13th UAPSG seminar with the theme Green Architecture, the Impact on the Living Environment, a Filipino Expatriate Architectural Journey, given this 14th day of September 2020, Singapore, signed Architect Mark Lester Alcantara Valignota, UAP President, co-signed by Architect Luisito Domalaon, UAP, District Director, UAP Regional B1. So Architect June, please accept this virtual certificate of appreciation.
Yeah, thank you very much. I
You're
got a
most
very
welcome.
psychological income from this conversation.
I'm glad to know that. All right. So having said that, we would like to um, make mention of the participants. Well, before that, I would like to call on to wrap these things all up. I'd like to call on the organizer and also the UAP Singapore chapter president, architect Mark Lester Valignota, for this closing remarks.
Hi, good evening, sir, and good evening
Good
po to
evening.
all. Sir, thank you po. I just want to share some short story po. Before kasi when I graduated in my college in Adamson, I started to apply po sa Palafox before. But unfortunately, I didn't pass. But it's okay. It's okay. I've been working with Gabriel Formosa before for 5 years. Then I
Good
think
for
I'm the yes, sir. I think I'm one of the luckiest person kasi we have the opportunity to have you here kahit hindi ako nakapag-work po sa Palafox. I'm very so blessed po to have you for tonight po.
thank you.
Thank you, sir. In behalf of the United Architects of Philippines Regional B1, a joint sustainable webinar series for the green architecture, the impact on the living environment, to our guest speaker for tonight's webinar series, a world-renowned green architect and urban planner, Architect Felino Palafox Jr. Indeed, your passions continues to move and reshape not only the local city skyline, but the landscapes of many other central businesses, districts, and key cities around the world, which eventually evolved into a lifelong passion for architecture that each and every Filipino architects to look up to, creating an opportunity to elevate the image and competency as global Filipino architects and change makers for societal good. Let me quote from his words: one of the greater challenges are the detractors, but I don't spend time thinking about them. I just pray for the enlightenment. When you have detractors, they motivate you to do better, to achieve more towards global excellence. Thus, this webinar series is indeed designed to be a virtual space of sharing meaningful messages and information using the lessons and inspiring stories of our guest speakers as the vehicle for spreading powerful ideas and learnings through green sustainable architecture. To all the participants and to my district B1, thank you. To Arquezonian, Atelier, Centrum, Manila Metro, Santa Mesa, Sampaloc, and Singapore. Special thanks to our District Director, Luisito Dumalaon, for the support system and assistance, to my Green Architecture Head, Jay Mendoza, and VP Larshir Mangaliman, and to all the UAP Singapore Chapter Board Directors, thank you. Let's take this opportunity to try new things and explore all the amazing technology available to allow continue to us for to thrive. And what has been made clear to this pandemic is the importance of disseminating knowledge across borders and all parts of society. Thank you again, Architect Felino Palafox Jr., for inspiring each and every one of us. Cheers and mabuhay, Majula Singapura. Thank you, sir.
Thank you. Thank you, architect.
Thank you, Architect Mark, the UAP Singapore chapter president. And I hope, Architect June, that you're able to read through the all the appreciation messages from all the participants in the chat group. They've been sending good feedback and thank you messages for all the life's lesson and learnings that you've shared with us tonight.
Yeah, thank you too. Thank you for inspiring me to be a better person, better citizen of the world, and a better architect.
All right. And to Architect Mark, you're hired. No, I'm just kidding. For
Yeah,
Palafox.
send me your CV. Yeah, you never
Oh,
know.
Yes,
all
sir. I will
right.
apply pag uwi ko.
Yeah, and even you guys, maybe we can co-author books. As I said, let's let's not bring our wisdom to the cemetery. Let's be good ancestors to future architects, future generations.
Okay, that's very good to know. And at this point, while we are showing on the screen the attendance, the list of participants for tonight's Zoom webinar, we'd like to also invite everyone to please respond to the evaluation poll that we will be also sending to the group, because again, your voice matters and we want to know what works for you, what didn't work. Tell us so we can improve more as we continue with the webinar series for the rest of the month. And also, we'd like to thank all our sponsors once again. We'd like to thank Connext uh, for for all your generosity and making this webinar series possible. Thank you also to Angeline, Unitech, Davis Paints, Tongson Law Offices, VK5 Solutions Pte Limited Singapore. Maraming maraming salamat. And what's next, architect? Oh, yeah, it's all right. There you guys. We're showing. on the screen all the participants. Thank you for joining us. There you go. And also, we'd like to announce our upcoming activities in the next coming days. Can we flash that on the screen as well? We got here, if there's a wheels, there's a way. And
Right.
that is I believe,
Mhm.
one of the proceeds of this webinar series goes to that project or that program where we are giving out wheelchairs. If there's a wheel, there's a way. And that is a CSR or corporate social responsibility project of UAP Regional District B1, wheelchair distribution to our elderly or and PWD chapter members. So uh, with in cooperation with our sponsors, we're making this possible. If there's a wheel, there's a way. And of course, Green Architecture, the impact on the living environment, a webinar series for a cause. Stay connected, stay united, UAP Regional District B1 for the fiscal year 2020-2021. So that's the main project. And also on September 20, that's on a Sunday. We invite you, if you're here in Manila, we would like to invite you to join us in this project as well. We will have these charity feeding program at Silver Lining in, where is that again? Didi,
Mountain.
it's in Smoky Mountain. So if you're free, you don't have anything to do on that Sunday, is that a morning time, right?
Yes, right. It's 10 a.m. in the morning.
Okay, so it's Sunday morning. If you want to partake and be part of that very noble cause, then please reach out to the organizers and raise your hand. Tell them that you want to join that meaningful event. So again, that's going to be on Sunday, September 20th. It's a charity feeding program in a silver line or at a silver lining in Smoky Mountain. And we will also have the upcoming webinar series. We will be joined by Dr. Clayton Miller for data science for the building industry research and skills that will change the industry. And that's happening on Saturday, September 19. Do we have time for this? Um, and right after Dr. Clayton Miller's uh, lecture, another remarkable guest speaker will be architect Edgardo Malieri. Can we go back to the previous screen? Yes, and towards zero carbon buildings, green action plan. So again, that's going to be on Saturday, September 19 from 5 to 8 p.m. And that will be followed by another series on Sunday, September 20th from 3 to 6 p.m. We will have three guest speakers talking about rethinking sustainable design, creating an architecture of resilience for current times by architect Luther Seat, co-founders of Inali Singapore, and architect Javier de Santiago, and also talking about placemaking will be Dr. Durley Mateo Babiano. She's a senior lecturer in urban planning. So this will be another productive and fruitful webinar series. So I hope you guys can join us for that. And on September 26th, Saturday, 5 to 8 p.m., Improving Wellness Through Vertical Greenery by Bei Lian. I hope I pronounce it right. A business development manager of Vertical Green Singapore. And right after that will be a lecture from architect Miguel Guerrero, a decade of practical green lesson learned. So you guys hope we hope to catch you on these succeeding Webinar Series. And so far, so good. We're doing great. We've been getting more and more participants, and we'd like to thank all of you for your support. Okay. Any more few words, Architect Mark, President Mark?
We're good. Thank you.
We're good. All right. So well, once again, good night, guys. And
Wait, sorry. Nag-polling na ba? Nag-polling na?
I don't think we are done with the polling
Ay,
survey.
sir, lunch ko lang yung polling Wait lang.
Okay.
Okay.
Please don't go away, guys. Here we go. Okay. So please take time to submit your feedback and your responses. That will go a long way for us. And again, if you have feedback, things that work and don't work for you, feel free to message us and the organizers and let us know what you think will best work for you and how we can improve on this webinar series. So there. And again, if you want to support the YouTube channel of UAP Singapore chapter, yes, the link is sent and it's appearing on the chat box. So please click that link and like and subscribe. All right, when you're done, you may now leave the room. Thank you so very much. Good night and
Night.
stay safe. God bless.
Best. Thank you.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you din po.
Thank you, Architect June. Thank you,
Thank
sir.
you.
Thank you po.
Thank you po.
Thank you.
Salamat po.
Congrats.
Thank you po.
Thank you so much, sir.
Thank you.
Thanks and God bless.
Salamat po.
Thank you po.
Thank you. Thank you.
Salamat po.
Thank you po. Salamat po.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you po. UAP board officer and district, stay muna kayo. Thank you.
Thank you po.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you po.
Salamat, Shopee.
Thank you po.
Hi, Marlu.
Thank you so much.
UAP board officer and district, stay muna kayo. Thank you.
Thank you, York.
Thank you. Bye po. Salamat.
Shout out to Uncle Greg.
Thank you
Hi,
po.
Marlu.
Thank you all. God bless po.
DJ.
Ay, Didi, ikaw na. Stop ko na yung record